Get off your duff and start. Anybody can do a podcast. You can do a podcast with one of these. Get off your duff and start. Is that simple?
Podcasting for personal branding. It is so important to get your message out there. And podcasting, being a guest on someone's podcast, is so easy nowadays with tools and softwares and such. And then even hosting a podcast is so easy. But what is the actual process that needs to go in place to get some of these things started, to stay consistent with it, to scale it? That part can be a bit more difficult. Starting's easy, scaling's difficult. So that's why on today's episode, I have Tom Fox. Tom Fox is passionate about podcasting and compliance. He is the leading voice in compliance and having founded the only podcast network in compliance, the award-winning Compliance Podcast Network. Tom has won 33 awards for podcasting, hosting, and producing podcasts. He is also an award-winning blogger, having posted the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report daily since 2010. Wow. Tom is also a best-selling author and having written 30 books in the areas of compliance, business ethics, and leadership. So he knows a thing or two about running a podcast. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Dave, thrilled to be here with you today.
Wonderful. So I was recently on your podcast where we talked about podcasting, and I think we probably could have gone on for another hour or so. So I think it would be good just to kind of continue it here. But for those who want to learn a little bit more about who you are and kind of what your focus is, give like a quick introduction.
Sure. I'm a lawyer by professional background. Practiced law for over 40 years. I went out on my own in 2010 to practice in a very niche area of anti-corruption compliance. And as a part of that opening of a practice, I blogged. I was laid up from a bad accident, so I couldn't, or the only time I could leave the house was to go to physical therapy. So I couldn't go meet someone, meet a client, have a drink, have a dinner, go to a conference, anything. And so I literally discovered social media. And I built a worldwide consulting practice out of my house, not meeting anyone. And the blogging led to podcasting in 2012. And it was just a natural extension of my marketing efforts through blogging. In 2017, I got the bright idea that I would start a podcast network in my niche area of the practice of law of anti-corruption compliance. I went around to the three big trade organizations and said, let's do a joint venture and create a podcast network. I could get no interest. So I just said, believe it, I'll do it myself. And I did. I putzed around for a couple of years. In 2019, I decided I had to fully commit to the network or move it to hobby status. So I quit practicing law, bought all the cool toys, built this huge infrastructure. And at the end of the year, I'd made about $10,000. And I thought, well, that was a nice experiment. Just have to go back to practicing law, which I did in Q1 of 2020 until March 15 of that year, where they shut the country down. And then what happened was at May 15 of that year, I got a call from literally every product provider in the compliance space, and they were all software products, with the same question: how long do you get access to your network? Because pre-pandemic, almost all marketing and compliance was done in person. Trade shows, breakfast roundtables, lunches, dinners, etc. And of course, that was not available to anyone. So I was in the anomalous situation of having people with money to spend and nowhere to spend it but with me.
Yeah.
So my little world blew up, and I went from 100,000 downloads across my network in May of 2020 to 250,000 by August of 2020. And since that time, I've just tried to consolidate that growth and expand the network even more. So one of my favorite phrases is when preparation meets opportunity, luck occurs. So however you want to call it, I was either very lucky or I was prepared.
I want to go back to 2012 when you started a podcast. What did that look like back then? I think nowadays podcasts kind of takes the form of many things. It doubles with kind of a YouTube channel in some cases now, but 2012, podcasting wasn't what it is today. So what did that look like for you, and why did you decide to take that as your avenue for marketing?
With the caveat that I barely can stand to look at those early podcasts, but because they're so cringeworthy, and I was in the middle of several brain surgeries, so my head was shaved. Um, it was me talking into the camera,
Mm.
literally Tom pontificating on anti-corruption compliance. And I pretty quickly evolved to interviews, same format you and I are using. And I found that that was a much more effective way for me to do a podcast. Number one, because the focus was on the guest. And two, it allowed me to learn. I'm a voracious learner. Insanely and intensely curious. And so if I would email someone and say, I'd like you to come on my podcast and talk about yourself, no one said no. So pretty quickly, I realized the interview format was the way for me to go, and I evolved to that. About 75 to 80% of my pods are interview format, and I have several that are just me, but they tend to be shorter.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel the same way you do. I know I felt the same way early on. Is put the spotlight on the guest, and I'll just be over here asking questions. What was the initial strategy, if you were thinking about it at all back then, with the podcast? Because you said you switched to guests coming on, and it still takes a lot of time and effort to run a podcast. How were you thinking about, okay, how is this going to translate into an ROI? How am I like, what's the result that I'm looking for out of guests coming on to my podcast?
You have ascribed to me a level of sophistication and planning that did not exist. I did it because it was the next cool thing, and I was the first one. So I was uber cool. And people would come on my podcast because I was literally the only podcaster in compliance. I didn't think about ROI. I don't think about ROI when I blog. I'm trying to show thought leadership and present information to consumers in the podcast format. That means audio consumers, as opposed to a blog, which is a written or visual consumer. So I'd never thought about ROI at all until I started the network, and it was just a way for me to expand my thought leadership. I was a third blogger in in compliance, so I had that going for me, and I was the first podcaster. So, and then the other thing was my then 16-year-old daughter, for about 30 days, thought I was cool because I had a podcast on iTunes. And she said, "Oh, yeah, my dad, he's on iTunes." Well, like I said, that lasted for about 30 days,
Yeah,
but still, for those 30 days, dad was cool.
there you go. That's the true motivation. Whatever makes you look cool to your daughter.
Right.
Yeah. So you mentioned there was maybe 2012 to 2019. I think you said you doubled down on the network. What was that experience like for the 7 years in terms of learning how to run a podcast? You mentioned you bought all the equipment and all that kind of stuff. I know a lot of the softwares that are out today we're using Riverside to run this remotely weren't, I believe, weren't really around back in 2012 or the early days. So what was it like trying to figure out the equipment, the software, the scheduling for having guests on? Was that duct taped together? How was that whole process?
That's a great way to describe it. It was me sending an email saying, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow?"
Yeah.
kind of thing. And literally, it was just me scheduling. I wasn't doing the number of pods I'm doing now, so it really wasn't difficult for me to keep it straight. I There was a few early software products that tried to capture this market. There was some phone app, and I used to record on my iPhone, and I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, you could record a phone call, and you got really good audio quality. I just remember that, unlike a typical phone call you would have. And I used that for a while. I used Skype. I think was the first re- video recording platform I used, and there was another one back then. I think was from Microsoft, but its name escapes me. Um, and I used those. This was even pre-Zoom.
Yeah.
And there weren't certainly any of these recording softwares. The first recording software I used was I met some guys called Squadcast.
Mhm.
They're now a part of Descript, and I had a great origin story. High school buddies, and just saw market opportunity and went in and filled it. And they were very cool guys. And so I used Squadcast for a few years pre-pandemic. Then Zoom became ubiquitous, and then Riverside and another platform called Restream came up, and I use those two now for my primary recordings. And it's the ultimate backup. Although I hate to use it, I will use Zoom.
Yeah, I can always tell when I'm a guest on someone else's podcast, like, do they use Riverside, or do they use a professional system, or are they just kind of hopping on a Zoom call? And that's usually where I think people start, just because it's the easiest thing to figure out, and then they eventually
Right.
figure out that there's way better products. So 2019, doubled down, started building out this network of a podcast, which I assume then the quantity of episodes and shows that you have to manage obviously increases. What was your thought there in terms of, okay, you mentioned before, I'm not really thinking about strategically like ROI of my efforts for podcasting, but when you start building out a network, I would imagine there's a little bit more thought into like how this is going to all pan out in the end.
Right.
What was the thinking there?
So I did start thinking about ROI, and back then the magic number was 30,000. 30,000 IAB certified downloads would get you advertising dollars. Now that was $25 a month or $25 an episode. It wasn't retirement money, but that was the magic number. And I knew a compliance focused network would never have a show with 30,000 downloads. But my vision was, well, maybe I could have 10 shows with 3,000. So I immediately began to try to get people to come on my network. And it wasn't just Tom with 30 shows. It was beg, borrowing, in some instances paying, actually in most instances paying people to come on my. I mean, I even had to pay my daughter to do a podcast.
What happened to her thinking you were cool?
Yeah, well, she grew up and went to college, and it's like, Dad, I'm busy. I'm like, honey, I'll pay you. So I finally got up, and then in the middle of that year, but remember, it's IAB certified downloads. And that was a specific measurement at the time, and I guess it's still around, but I had multiple non-IAB certified platforms I was posting on where I got really good numbers,
Mm.
but none of the advertisers would take them. And I went to Podcast Movement that summer. I had a whole sort of marketing package to talk to advertisers and had all the numbers, and I could, pull up my computer and show them the numbers, and no one was interested. They couldn't have cared less. And they said, look, if it ain't IAB certified, we don't count it, period, end of story, end of statement. And I remember I left that conference. I was so depressed. And I don't know if you know Chris Kermatos, but he runs Podfest Expo. And he was showing as an exhibitor, and I went to say goodbye, and he put his arm around me. And he's one of two people who calls me Tommy. He goes, Tommy, you just keep doing what you're doing. It'll pay off. And I didn't believe him at the time, but he was right. But it was all about IAB certified downloads. And one of the things I'm trying to lead the discussion on literally in 2025 is it's not downloads, it's engagement. It's listens, it's people who comment, it's people who double click, it's people who post, people who repost. There's a variety of measures. And unfortunately, everyone calls it something different. So there's a download, there's a listen, there's an impression, there's a participation, there's an engagement. And in 2023, I finally cracked the code on all of those numbers. And when I started, and when I say crack the code, they're all in LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. It just took a long time to figure out what they were. And once I figured that out and I saw the numbers in my network, I had something very impressive. I had something that I could show people, and it's auditable. So if anybody says we don't believe your numbers, I'm like, here it is. You tell me what you want to see, and I'll give you my passwords. And so I started making a real splash when I could show the total engagement of my network, and starting in 2023. And that's been one of the big things I've been able to bring forward, is to try to get people to talk about what's your engagement, because that's really what advertisers or marketers need to know.
Interesting. So when you say engagement, do you mean the repurposed content onto other platforms, or are people engaging on the streaming or YouTube platforms of the episode?
All of the above and much more.
Okay.
So it can be any of those, but it's any time somebody touches your podcast. Are they listening to it? Are they streaming it? Are they engaged with it? Are they repurposing it? Are they cutting out snippets and using it? Are they commenting on it? Are they sending it to their internal networks? All of those things are valid measurements, and they're valid measurements of your entire reach. And that's what advertisers are most interested in, is what's your reach?
Okay. So I think when people think about podcasts too, they think, okay, I record something, let's call it just all video for simplicity, record something through video, whether it's me and a guest, and then I put it out on the podcast network, Spotify, Apple, etc., and maybe YouTube as well. And so it has its life there. And then we've seen on like TikTok, Instagram, sometimes LinkedIn, repurposed clips that go out onto those social platforms. How should we be thinking about the distribution, the after promotion of our episodes in order to help with that like amplification and engagement post episode?
So, Dave, I've come around to thinking that is at least as important as your podcast for a couple of different reasons. So I deal in still in the compliance space, still dealing with product companies that are software companies, 10, 30, 50 million in gross revenues. And that they're all big enough to have a CMO, but no one has a content creator. So they are starved for content to use as marketing. And so what I provide is marketing content based on the podcast. So we'll stick with video because we're recording in video, and you're going to get all this. So you're going to get 4 videograms, 3 at 60 seconds or less for Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, 1 at 2 minutes or less for LinkedIn. I write out all the tweets, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I provide all of that in addition to the links and the embed code. Now, with that, that is evergreen marketing material. Now, you can use that on any of those platforms, but with a clip, you can put it in your own newsletter. You can put it in an email. It's like I was on Tom Fox's podcast, and we were talking about X subject. Here's what I said. I'd like to talk to you a little bit further. What do you think? And that can be an engaging type of marketing for you to use. You're only limited by your imagination on how you use it, but those marketing clips live on, and you can use them literally for at least 6 months. And so what I provide is that package of content, but that's as important as what the podcast does and show you as a thought leader.
I think it's interesting too, because I mean, there's the difference between educational podcasts and like entertainment podcasts. I see on certain platforms, there are podcasts where I've only seen the clips of that podcast come up in my feed, and I enjoy the clips, but I've never actually watched the full podcast itself. And it's kind of similar to, Saturday Night Live has not, the viewership has gone down over the years, but they repurpose their skits onto YouTube, and I'll watch those all day long because I'm just browsing YouTube and such. And so it's this like afterlife of the asset that you have to kind of get in front of the audience in their audience in their feeds to kind of like show this is interesting. But I think a key element there is getting interesting content to post onto those feeds. How do you find like the juicy question or whatever? So how do you think about, or how do you prep going into, because I've seen this myself, how do you prep going into an episode to help with that like post distribution of getting the best clips so that those can act as kind of like salespeople for your episode? Because if they're out there on the feed, people find the clips interesting, they'll go check out your podcast. How do you think about the prep going into it to help get the best like post clip material?
So I probably should have said my podcasts are B2B podcasts. I'm not in the entertainment business, sports, et cetera. I'm not in the commentary business. So it's B2B podcasts. There are at least four, maybe five reasons to have a B2B podcast: thought leadership, content creation, audience engagement, interpersonal or personal relationship development, and then sales. And any or all of those are valid. So, what's the purpose of your podcast? And I'm glad you brought up this point because you put it back on me. How do I prepare as the host to create the situation which will give the clip? That is absolutely the host's responsibility. It's not the guest's responsibility to give you a soundbite. If they do, hallelujah. And sometimes people will give me the podcast title in their commentary, and I always stop them right there and I say, "You just won a gold star." But so my pre-production process is I review LinkedIn, I look at your website, I'll do research on you, I create an outline that I will provide to you. There are going to be no surprises on my podcast. It's a celebration of you, what you do in your company. It's generally going to be along the lines of the following. One, your professional background, how you got to where you are. If you started a company, what market need did you see or market opportunity did you see that you want to exploit? Two is tell me about your company and what problem does your company solve? What's its unique value proposition, I think would be the marketing term. Three is how do you see what you do going forward? So asking you to look down the road a little bit. And now, of course, that's around AI. And then finally, let's look down the road 5 years. Where do you see you? Where do you see your company? Where do you see compliance in 5 years? So I have numerous questions within that format, but that's the general format I use. And I'm always able to get clips based upon that format. I provide that outline to the guest. If the guest has any comments or wants edits, fine with me. We'll make those so that they know going in what I'm going to ask. Now, I do tell people I'm a complete, total, and utter geek. And if you open a rabbit hole, I reserve the right to go as far down as I can. And every compliance person's a geek. So they all love that. Yeah. And so, and the podcast people are geeks too. So, we can go down a rabbit hole. I try to do 20 to 30 minutes, but that's not a hard and fast rule either. So that's the process. And the software I use to prepare me to get the outline is Notion. And I know you use Notion. I don't use it perhaps as comprehensively as you do, but it's my main scheduling and production kind of process platform.
Yeah, I'm a big content systems and tech nerd, so that could be my rabbit hole. But with that, I mean, you started to tease what I was going to ask next is, okay, before the podcast, I asked, how many podcasts are you on per day? And most of them are you hosting the podcast? And you mentioned like 3 to 4 per day. And I'm saying, sometimes I'll have 2 a day and my brain will be fried. And then there's there's prep, there's the actual recording, and then there's the post that we talked about. What are your systems, resources, people that you have in place to help you manage this entire network?
So in addition to Notion, I have this superwoman named Jaja, and Jaja runs everything. She contacts all the guests, she does all the onboarding, she schedules me, she tells me, here's where you need to be, here's the time you need to be, here's the outline you need, go forth and record, Tom. And then from there, I take it over. I do all the post-production. I do all the editing. I create the social media sharing assets. There are tools that will do that for you, Descript, and there's some others. But I still like to do that myself because I like to see the clip I'm creating. Riverside does that now as well, so that's another resource. And if you just want clips, all of those are very, very good. But I still do that manually myself. Do the production, create the show notes, post the show notes, produce up the episode in GarageBand, and then post to the podcast platform. So and for me, that's Megaphone.
Descript for the clips, but you use GarageBand for the episode?
Yes.
Oh, is there a reason you don't use Descript for the episode?
Well, I don't know. I never thought of.
I never thought of it the other way.
Never done it that way. And GarageBand came preloaded on Apple in 2012. So I just started editing, and I originally edited in GarageBand audio, and so I just save everything in GarageBand.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna say Descript is, so for those who don't know, Descript is this amazing video editing tool. Super easy, comprehensive. It transcribes your video so that if you want to edit the video itself, you just have to highlight a section in the words and delete the words, and it actually deletes it from the video. So it's, if you can edit a Google Doc, you can edit your video essentially, as they say.
So now I have to stop you. Are you telling me that with my fully edited video in Descript, as we Texans would call it, Descript, I can upload that directly into Megaphone?
I'm not sure about Megaphone because I use Spotify for my distribution, but it does have integrations into the um, streaming networks, and so there are many of them.
Hmm.
So you could click a
Well,
button.
Megaphone is owned by Spotify, so
Okay.
maybe. Now I
Um,
know I can go from Riverside directly into Descript, but
yeah.
actually I didn't know that. I thought you had to download it to some location, and then Megaphone would pull an MP3 from that location. And for me, that location is GarageBand.
So I don't think this is technical stuff. So the audience, just bear with us. But I don't I don't think Descript connects into Spotify. So we still have to download the
Okay.
video and then upload it to Spotify. But there are other options. It does connect right into YouTube. So with the click of a button, you can send it right to YouTube. But Descript, for those interested in starting a podcast or even YouTube videos, because I do my YouTube videos on there sometimes too, is there are AI tools in Descript now where you can vibe edit, as they say. You can talk to a like an AI chat and say, "Hey, do cut back and forths between who's speaking at the time, add zoom in, zoom outs, etc., and it will do the editing for you." So a lot of cool stuff in Descript to check out, and especially if you're already creating your clips from it, you know, you already have that in there. So let's talk about like the business of podcasting, because you mentioned 2020 comes around and you're holding like the cure for, well, maybe I shouldn't use that expression for that instance, but
Probably
you're
not.
holding a golden ticket essentially
Right.
for what people are looking for at that time. And then you went, oh wait, I'm now getting all this demand. How has that evolved over the last 5 years into like a business? How do you see your podcasting network now, and how are you monetizing?
So most of the ideas I had for revenue I developed pre-pandemic, and they all got accelerated during the pandemic. So I have 5 or 6 different revenue streams. It starts with a podcast appearance fee. Um, then if you want to sponsor the pod and appear, that's another fee. If you want to sponsor a podcast series, so podcast A series, you can do that over 3 months. If you want to sponsor a podcast series for a year, you can do that. If you want to sponsor my network for some period of time, you can do that. If you want to sponsor the newsletter, I have a daily newsletter 5 days a week, and then 2 newsletters on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. You can sponsor a newsletter. And then, but the biggest, most lucrative offering I have is I mentioned that in my business silo, everybody's got a CMO, but nobody's got a content creator. So these companies are starved for content. And so I'll do a podcast, a 5-part series as a package. And it's 5 podcasts with one general theme or storyline. But within the podcast, they're all standalone episodes. They are relatively short at 15 minutes, and that's by design to focus on one topic, one guest, one topic for 15 minutes. But when you put all 5 together, you've got an hour and 15 minutes of a comprehensive topic. Then I create 4 social media shares, or videograms rather. Then I write out all the sharing materials. That's about 15 different pieces of content per episode. I write a blog for each episode. I re-edit the blogs into a longer form white paper. So a company gets about 35 pieces of social media marketing content in addition to the podcast, the 5-part series. Um, that's by far my most popular offering. From that, I've evolved to I'll take that 5-part series and write a book, or take a podcast series and write a book about it, or I write a book and then do a podcast series after that. That's become a very popular offering as well. And I ghostwrite books for people in the compliance space. So those are my basic service offerings.
And is that typically those who are opting into that, is that specifically in the compliance niche, or do you find that people across niches are okay?
It's all within the niche of anti-corruption or compliance.
Yeah. And how are people, what's your process for like finding guests and then going through that process of kind of quote unquote pitching, or at least introducing those offers? So how do you kind of act as host and salesperson in a way when you're trying to get a guest?
It's very easy. If I ask you to come on my podcast, no charge. If you ask me to come on my podcast, it's a charge.
Okay.
So that's how I differentiate it.
Easy enough. So I want to also then get into, you've built a network that allows people to access a community that they otherwise can't tap into. Also, the services that you provide on top of that. So it's very useful. Have you kind of put any equity into your own personal brand to help establish the like credibility of the network, or to attract those guests more frequently? I know you've got some shiny trophies back there that probably support your personal brand, but how much energy are you putting into like your own personal brand versus the brand of the network?
Either it's going to be one of two answers: none, or I still believe I have to earn it every day.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you played sports in high school, but all of those stupid tapes run in my head. You got to earn it every day. When the going gets tough, the tough get going, etc. And so I feel like I have to earn it every day. And the credibility of my network was based upon the credibility I had created in the blogging space. And I'd written, I think my first book was 2011. And I've been writing continuously since then. And I've written the definitive handbook in compliance. I wrote the definitive book for the use of AI in compliance 3 months ago or 4 months ago. And so I've continued that process, and I just believe that I basically have to outwork everybody. And so I do. I get up very early in the morning and I work very long hours.
Yeah, I was going to say, to host 4 podcasts and then do all the post-production yourself seems like a lot of work.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I work 12 to 15 hours every day and 8 hours on Sunday. I take Saturday off to be with my wife. So,
and then with that, so this, you mentioned you needed, you had $10,000 with 2019, and it was a good experiment. I want to ask you, what your numbers are today, but how healthy of an income do you have now that would, I guess, speaking to our audience, if they were like, I'm kind of interested in this, do you find that this process, what you're going through today, is like, I'm making enough income to make this all worth it?
6 figures.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't start with a 1.
Have you found any additional benefits to running this network beyond like the monetary side of things? Because you're meeting a lot of people, and that's one of the things I love about the host format, is like meeting people and connecting. I'm actually going through every 6 months. I go back through my podcast guest list and I reconnect with them over a catch-up call. And I just had one before this, and we realized we're like on a very similar trajectory, and how can we work together again? So what are some of the other benefits of just running this podcast network?
Absolutely. Number one, it appears as if I'm the smartest guy in compliance. I am not, but I'm talking to the smartest people, and I'm talking to everyone. So I'm able to connect the dots, and I can see around corners, not because I have Superman see around corner vision, but because I'm talking to people who are already around those corners. And so my book on AI in the use of compliance. I interviewed 6 people in compliance who had developed an interest in AI very early, and I was able to take everything they had done and put that together in a book. And the book's been very successful. So it's made me a much better lawyer, a much better compliance professional, much better thinker, a much better writer and author. I get to meet people like you, which is insanely cool. I don't know if you know who Dave Jackson is, but he's an old guy of podcasting. He's in the Podcasting Hall of Fame. I interviewed him last week or 2 weeks ago, and he's like, Tom, I can't believe we've never been together on a pod. This is so great. I'm like, I'm talking to Dave Jackson, that kind of thing.
That's your
So,
Michael Jordan.
yeah, exactly. And I just get to talk to the coolest people, and everybody knows who I am. And I've been able to help educate and influence literally a generation of compliance professionals. And now I'm trying to do the same for podcasters.
Love it. Well, I look forward to following that journey because, this podcaster could certainly take some notes. So, Tom, thank you so much for being on today's episode. Before we leave, what I like to do is kind of end each episode with, if you kind of had your, ideal person that you want to speak to. In this case, let's call it the entrepreneur, the personal brand who wants to get into podcasting. What's the one thing that you want to kind of like make sure you grab them, shake them, and make sure that they realize this one thing?
Get off your duff and start. Anybody can do a podcast. You can do a podcast with one of these. Get off your duff and start. It's that simple.
There it is. That's there's the headline right there. And also, too, if people want to learn a bit more about you, about your network, where can they go to find a little bit more information about you?
So LinkedIn is great. Love to connect with anyone. It's Thomas R. Fox. The network is the Compliance Podcast Network, www.compliancepodcastnetwork.net. And if you want to go rural, the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network I have another podcast network in the rural part of Texas I live in, the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network.com.
Perfect. All those links will be in the show notes below. Tom, thank you so much for being on today's episode.
It was really my pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful. See you all in the next episode of the Personal Brand Blueprint.